Craft Brews and Casual Conversations. It's a microbrew edition of Dudes with Brews on a Porch. Rob and Adam DeCollibus, an author, they're going to be drinking some coffee. I'm going to be drinking nothing because I'm a wuss. And this is Dudes with Brews on a Porch.
This is a short one like me. Dudes with Brews on a Porch presents Michael Brews.
Dude. Adam, man, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. Today I've got a light roast from Starbucks. I got a blonde coffee with an E.
Do you like that blonde coffee?
You know, I do. A friend of mine went to go get a coffee, and my friend really likes like extra strong stuff. And he asked the barista, like, "Hey, you know, which blend has like the hardest hitting caffeine?" And the barista said, actually, the blonde, like the light roast does, because the darker the roast is, the more like the caffeine gets like roasted out of the bean, I guess. So the lighter the roast, the more caffeine that is naturally in the bean that's still there. So, hey, if it's got more caffeine, I'll take it. I like it.
That's what it's there for. That's why we're drinking it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Rob's drinking some Seattle's Best coffee that I found in the coffee aisle of Walmart. It is the port side blend. It's heavy and well-rounded. The medium roast, smooth roasted. Rob also put some what do you put? Coconut sugar in there?
Yeah, I got a tablespoon of coconut sugar.
Is that good?
It is, but I drank it before I put the sugar in it too, and it was a little bitter. But I'm not a fan of bitter, so
yeah,
that's why.
Same.
I drink my coffee black because I don't know.
You have children.
I'm just too lazy, and I just don't care anymore. I'm just in it for the try to wake me up a little bit, or survive it through work or the day. That's how I do it. But
yeah, I'm a big believer that there's two camps when it comes to coffee. There are the people who just like it like straight, like you do, just like black. And then there are the people like me who I like a little bit of coffee in my cream.
Yeah, that's how I am too. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I think a good creamy coffee, man, it's almost different than drinking coffee. It's like a whole little dessert. I really enjoy it.
I learned to drink coffee when I was 5, and I never looked back. But I heard something crazy that was like the more conservative you are, the more bitter you like your coffee. I don't know if that's true.
I think I'm pretty open-minded.
Yeah, you're pretty liberal, so you cut through that study. You should have been around when they did the survey.
I guess so. So Adam, you're over in California, but in your bio it says you're a little bit of a man of the world. You've spent a lot of time in South America. You love to travel. You're a pretty young guy, and we should mention we kind of went with the coffee because you're not even 21 yet.
Yeah, no, I'm not yet.
This is incredible story too, by the way.
Thank you, man. Yeah. My life story in short is, I grew up in a small town in California, way out in the mountains. And it's like one of those towns that has like one big brick building and like a bunch of little cafes, and that's about it. And, books and movies were basically what kept me going. And I just loved story. It's just something that stayed with me my whole life. And when I was young, I got to travel a little bit down in South America. I have family down there, and we would just hop around and go to the different countries. And it was an awesome adventure growing up a little bit down south. There's this one saying from the movie Count. I think it's the Count of Monte Cristo, and the main actor says this, and he says, when you're young, everything's an adventure, and that was that's the best way to sum it up. It was awesome, and it taught me a lot about travel, taught me a lot about different cultures, and it just made me realize how many interesting people there are.
Well, that actually leads. That's a good segue into one of the first questions that I have, actually, because I was did you? So you traveled as a kid a lot, more so, right? Is that what you're kind of telling me? Is that you traveled around? You're still a kid. What am I talking about? No offense, but did you travel at all for the novel, or did you write the novel after you traveled around a lot and got the idea for it?
I wrote the novel after I traveled, but believe it or not, I never traveled to any of the places that are in the book, except for London. But I've never been to Morocco or the desert.
I actually wasn't able to like, I looked up the book to try and get it, but honestly, for it to ship to me and everything, it wouldn't have gotten here until after this interview. But I noticed that there were like four or five other novels by the same name. Is there like a significance to the name
Caravan?
To Caravan? Yeah, we should say all the details of the book. Caravan is the name.
I'm sorry, you cut out. What was the question?
Just because I saw, like, when I looked it up, there were like 4 or 5 other books with the same name. So I was wondering what the significance of the name Caravan was.
Yeah. So one of the books, believe it or not, which is on my bookshelf right now, is Caravans by James A. Michener. That one I read while I was writing my own book, Caravan. And the reason why I chose the name is I think it's really simple and straight to the point. And I tried a bunch of different names for it, and it's kind of like naming a character in a book. Sometimes it just fits, and even if it's like a regular name like Joe, there could be a character who's like, okay, this guy's definitely a Joe. And when I was coming up with a name for the book, I thought, Caravan, it just resonates with what the story is. It's a journey through the desert. It's about a caravan, and I chose it because of that.
It is amazing. Like, I was doing a different podcast before I became the co-host of this podcast. Drew did this on his own to begin with, and then I started being a guest host or whatever. But the podcast that I was starting, the name was so hard for me to come up with. It was, and then once somebody told me the name, an idea, like my older brother gave me an idea, and I was like, that's it. There's no going back from that. So I get that 100%.
Yeah.
So what's Caravan? You mentioned this is your book that you're talking about that's coming out soon. What's it about, and what's your process? How did what made you want to write this?
Yeah. So Caravan is a story about a man from England who travels across the Sahara to photograph the people, the culture, and the desert for this magazine in London. And while he's traveling across the desert, he falls in love with the desert. He falls in love with the life that he finds there, because it allows him to rebuild himself. In the story, I explain a little bit more that he had been a photographer during the First World War, and like the millions of people who experienced this wild event, he returned to his home feeling dislodged from his country and knocked out of regular society. And now that he's in this caravan, he's able to repiece himself in his life, and he realizes that he can be doing so much more. So the story, it focuses a lot about freedom, about adventure, about different cultures. And also about how the choices that we make in our life, how they dictate the rest of our lives. So in essence, that's what the book is about. And I wanted to write this book for people who enjoy journeys like that. Yeah. One of the books that had a big inspiration on me was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Oh, okay.
And So if you've read it, then you know. The story is kind of similar. It's about this shepherd from Spain who believes that there's, he has this vision that there's a treasure by the pyramids, and he's compelled to go on this great journey. And along the way, he learns a lot about the world. He learns a lot about himself and about his life purpose. And when I read that book, I was instantly inspired to do 2 things. One, which was to follow my own purpose, which is to write and to create great stories, and 2, to tell a story about a man in the Sahara learning about himself and learning about the world. So in short, those were a couple of the inspirations.
So in a sense, it kind of feels like with your story in general, your personal life story, traveling to South America, seeing these other countries, you can probably put definitely a lot of like personal touches into the story. It's something that you know about, you're qualified to write about. So, that seems pretty interesting and pretty important. Would you say, traveling, seeing all these different cultures, different societies, different types of people, you would say you've adapted and learned a lot about yourself as well?
Oh, you know what, man? Absolutely. I think that when you go to another country, and I don't know if you've traveled, but I know whenever I go somewhere where I don't speak the language, like it's not like England or Australia, when you go there, you'll land, you'll get in a taxi, and then when you go to buy something, whatever it is, let's say it's even just the taxi, there's this moment that will hit you like a ton of bricks, and that's when you realize, wait a minute, this guy, if I say whatever I'm going to say in English, I'm going to be speaking in digits to him. And likewise, whatever he's going to say back to me is, I'm not going to understand it at all because there's that language barrier. And it's weird, out of that chaos of kind of having to reorganize every single little thing off of, because your environment completely changed. You learn little things about yourself, and you also learn little things about people and how, no matter where you go, there's always going to be people just like you who, will laugh at the same things and are good humored. And, traveling, I highly recommend it. It's very, very, it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. A language barrier can make you like, it breaks down personality to our basis human ideals of feeling and functionality or whatever. So like you do see that there is no difference except for the sounds that come out of people's mouths. Otherwise, we're all the same. Really.
Yeah.
I did. When you write. Do you write? I have a couple questions here about this a little bit, but because I when I write stuff, I tend to follow the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, like that formula of this, of story structure. Do you have a structure that you follow, or do you just do you have a story in mind and write it kind of as it goes and see where it takes you?
You know what? When I wrote Caravan, I didn't have. I knew where the story was going to go. Don't get me wrong. I knew how it was going to wrap up. I knew what the climax was going to be and all the important plot points. But I didn't have in Act 1, this is what's going to happen, and the second major plot point in Act 2 is going to be this. I didn't have it outlined, but I now when I do write, I do follow. That 3-act system of the first act has to be 25%, and second act 55, and third act 20, so that then it all it wraps up well. And if I feel like it's getting stifling, I bend the rules because the story is the most important thing for me. But it definitely helps, and I enjoy it a lot. So yeah, I do try to follow the story structure when it helps.
And then that kind of leads me into the second question, because you're not even 21, which is really young to be a published author for a novel. Did you when you decided to be a writer, which it sounds like you kind of knew from an earlier age than you are even now? Did you have like a mentor or like a teacher or somebody that helped you kind of I don't know what the word is, but to kind of like just to kind of help you bloom into being a writer, and then help you get through the red tape of publishing and all that? Because like that's one thing that I think people get hung up on, is like, even once you write something, there's a whole nother process after that's hard to even know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, once you have your kid, that's when it begins. In starting it, I'd talked to one person I knew who self-published a book, and I talked to him, to get some advice on like, okay, what would be a good a good way to go about this. And this person, gave me some basic, pointers, like, okay, write out a basic outline of the book and then just go for it and publish it. But there wasn't any full-time authors or mentors that I had that I went back and I referenced while I was writing. I honestly just kept my nose to the paper and I went at it.
So when you mentioned the publishing and stuff now, this day and age, there's a lot of different avenues of publishing. There's online, there's finding a major publishing company, or, there's just so many independent ways of doing it. And it kind of seems like you have the DIY ethos to you when it comes to writing. But probably one of the biggest things, like for me, if I always have an idea, it's like for example, me and Rob one time brainstormed just a cheesy horror flick, and we figured everything out. But if it came down to me and him actually having to write it, like for me personally, I don't even know where I would start, how I would do it. So for you to write an entire novel, for anyone to write an entire novel for that matter, like what would you suggest, for anyone to sit down, wants to write, what do you do?
Ooh, I would say biggest thing you could do is give yourself permission to suck. I like that. One of the things that stopped me from writing was I held way too high of a standard, and that's good to have a high standard. I'm all for it. I'm a perfectionist at heart. But I think that you have to be self-aware enough to know when you're just using perfection as an excuse. And okay, you know what? Just remind yourself that you can always go back and edit it. Nothing's been published yet. You can just go write it and get it out there first. You're never going to know how bad it is till you see it on the page. And it's weird. When you write, you're going to understand that there are ideas that you're like, wow, I thought this was going to be a great idea, but it turned out completely different. And then there are going to be ideas that you're like, okay, this is going to suck to write, but screw it, I'm just going to go for it. And that turns out being an amazing idea. So I'd say experiment, just have fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, try doing something else. Just have fun. Give yourself permission to suck, and if you want to publish.
Yeah, I've actually heard a similar advice to that, which is that first off, don't measure yourself by the standard that you measure your favorite authors or your favorite works of your favorite things that you've read, because the best things that you read will discourage you from writing. And then also to remember that just write. If you know how to critique something, if you've ever read something or seen a movie, if you want to write movies or whatever, and gone, oh, this is wrong with that, this is wrong with that, then write whatever you want to write and then go back and critique it as if it were somebody else that wrote it. So as far as I understand, because like I said, I haven't been able to read the book, but I do definitely plan on it because it sounds interesting, and definitely after talking to you, I want to get into it. But it's kind of a historically accurate with characters that you made up, correct? Did I? Yeah,
there's
right?
There's no reference to any major historical figures, but the people in the story, they went through historical events. Yeah.
So I guess because one of the things is that I've had ideas for things that do have historical references, and one of the things that I do is I get hung up on researching. I like to write. I'm not good at researching. Did you have any help with research, or did you do all that stuff on your own?
I did. I did all the research on my own, and believe it or not, the very first draft I did exactly 0 minutes of research. The very first draft, and as once I fleshed it out, I looked at the parts that were lacking, and I thought, okay, this needs to be brought to life a little bit more. What does this need? And I would research it. Or if the cuisine in a certain town didn't seem it seemed out of place, in my imagination, then I would research it. And it's cool because once you research it in kind of like adding the spice on top of the meal, it really adds a good flavor to the story overall. That being said, I think that novels, as well as books that are just, even nonfiction books that are based on a good amount of research, they just have, you just feel like you trust them so much. One of the books I think that does this, I read the book Roots, which became a 1970s series. And I read the book on that. And that book, just the level of research that it has, I have so much respect for Alex Haley, the author. Like he goes into how the people way back in the 1700s, how they would, what they would eat, what a father-son relationship would be like. When you know that, and you go and you read a book that tells you these things early on, you can trust the rest of the story. And it makes it so much more enjoyable when there's research put into a book.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that, you correct me if I'm wrong, or if this actually, I'm more interested. Not even correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm more interested in if this happened while you were writing your story, because with the stuff that I've read into about how to go about writing and stuff, one of the things, there's a couple different schools of thought, and one of the schools of thought is if you develop your characters well enough, the story can write itself in ways that you don't even foresee, because if you have a character written well enough and then you put them in a situation, they'll end up doing things that you really wouldn't have thought about unless unless you were looking at it from the point of the view of like a super well-defined character. So did you develop your main character, or was he based on yourself, or did you ever find yourself writing and your character got into situations that you hadn't even anticipated?
You know what? It's really weird. If you write, then you know what I'm talking about. You'll make a character, and you'll add more and more depth into the character, and you'll learn more and more about the character. And the more situations that you put the character in, it starts having a life of its own, and it's really weird. So yeah, to answer your question really quick, yes, I did develop my characters independently for myself, but there's this one quote from Steven Pressfield that says, you can write characters that are smarter than you are. And I totally believe that, because I've put characters in situations where I'll look back on it after I wrote and think, okay, what would I have done that in that situation? And my answer is completely different. Either it was, a completely different way to solve the problem, or something completely different, totally. So, I'm a big fan of developing your characters and making them real people that you can talk to, and and ask them, okay, what would you be feeling right now? And then you can transcribe that onto the page. Yeah, to answer that question, yes.
What are some of your, you're bringing up a lot of various authors and stuff like that, but what are the type of books you like to read? Are you history? It seems like you're pretty well versed in history and things like that. Do you like, a lot of people like the murder mysteries and everything like that? The last book I think I bought was the BC Boys book, and I haven't read it yet. I still need to read it.
Good stuff. Yeah. I read a lot of, I don't read all the different genres, but my scope does go pretty wide. One genre that I really like is I like historical fiction. Stories that can isolate a certain time and a certain area, maybe even a certain event or a person, and add context to that, even if it's completely fictional. Add context to that is just really, it enhances the way we remember things. So since I'm a big history nut, I love, thinking, okay, who was the last person to say, hello to JF Kennedy? And to think that actually happened, and somebody could expound on that in a work of fiction, I enjoy the hell out of reading it.
Yeah, I really like true events with fictional characters. There's a lot you can do in that genre or whatever, and I do enjoy those stories a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rob has a question down here, and I'm going to kind of stem off of the question, but as an author, you potentially face the opportunity to make your book into a movie. Are you a movie over book guy, book over movie guy, or kind of in between?
I enjoy them both, but to answer that question, if I knew I was going to be marooned on an island, and I could take either 100 books or 100 films both in perfect condition, I would take the books.
Yeah,
because they don't give you the option to take a DVD player, right? That's just
take the CDs.
Yeah,
completely useless.
No, yeah, I think books. You can reread a book over and over again. Like, there's so many. One of my favorite books is House of Leaves by Mark Danielinsky, and I've read it 3 or 4 times, three and a half times. I can pick it up and read it from any point in the story and get into it, but every time I read it, I get a different story out of it. In books, that's something that's kind of unique to books over movies. I mean, movies, you can rewatch movies and get different things that you didn't see, but books, really good books, you can read multiple times and get completely, identify with different characters, and when you identify with a different character, you get a whole different sense of the story.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, a friend and I, we had a little debate over this about a week and a half ago. And one of the things that we touched upon is that if you're going to watch a movie, unless if it's a series, if you're going to watch a movie, you're going to have to sit down, and for however long, 2-3 hours, you're going to have to sit down and watch it. With a book, it's a little bit more time. It's less time sensitive. You can sit down, you can read for 5 minutes, and then keep on doing what you're doing. And then when you pick it up, it's still there's no. It doesn't feel like you took a break. But if you're watching a movie and you can only watch 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, by the end of the movie, you're like, okay, I have no idea why I should care about this character. So that's, in a way, that's one of the magic of books, is that there are these pieces of art that we can enjoy at whatever pace we want to enjoy. We can sit down in an evening and just crush a whole novel, as there are elephant readers who can do that, or you can take a couple weeks and you can really enjoy it and you can soak in the prose.
Yeah, you carry it with you.
It just depends. It depends.
I do have a couple questions about just writing overall. So, because you've lived in New York and California, correct?
No, just in California.
Oh, for some reason I thought that. All right, well that scratch that. Well,
although I do want to go to New York one of these days.
Yeah. I mean, California and New York, in terms of the United States, those are the two epicenters of creative ability. I guess one question I had is, do you find any elitism over screenwriters between novelists and screenwriters, between we're better than this one, or we're better than that one? Or do they just do you guys just acknowledge the craft and acknowledge hey, a good writer's a good writer?
I think, I think it partly depends on the person, but I think overall, I think it's, I haven't dealt with screenwriters yet, but I think with authors, who write in different genres, it's almost like different sports. I think it's the way that a sprinter would look at a power lifter. If they're both champions, there's a mutual respect of, I can, even though my goal is to run this many yards in this many seconds and your goal is to lift this much weight with good form, there's a respect. So I don't think I'm not aware of any elitism. I think overall there's a good, healthy respect in the community.
Awesome. The book is Caravan. Adam, where can people get the book? Where can people get in contact with you and keep going with all the projects you got going on?
Yeah. So the book is going to be coming out here in a couple weeks. I can't give you an exact date yet, but either by the time this episode airs, it's going to be out or it's going to be coming out soon. Best place to get it is going to be on Amazon. Shortly after that, you'll be able to get it in bookstores wherever you go. But for right now, Amazon's the best place to get it. You can find me on Instagram at Adam_DeCollibus. And you can get the last name spelling from the show notes.
Yeah.
But that's where you can find me. That's where you can find the book.
Now I feel better that I didn't read it because it's not out yet.
Well, I do have some pre-release copies. If you want, I could send over one.
Well, either way, I'm going to read it. I'm very interested in checking it out, and honestly, hopefully, keeping in touch with you if you write anything else and want to come back on the show, obviously. But this was really, really interesting and insightful for me because I do write stuff, but I have never really looked any further, in terms of publishing or anything like that. So it's always good to talk to somebody who's done it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm happy you got something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for being on the show, and of course, you're welcome back anytime. Just hit us up, and everyone should buy your book and make you incredibly rich. And then,
one last question.
I like this guy. This guy.
What do you have any new you've traveled 17 different countries. You've written a novel and published it by 21. You're somebody to keep an eye on. Like, what do you got in the pan for coming up? Or have you not thought that far ahead yet?
I can't say anything yet, but I've got some ideas. I've got more books for sure. And who knows? But all I can say is just more books, more of the same, more good stuff.
Awesome. Well, keep in touch with us on that for sure.
Yeah, we'll do, brother. I'd love to be on again sometime. Let's set it up.
Awesome.
Sure. Thanks, man.
Nice talking to you.
Pew pew audio. Goodbye, everyone.